Materials supplied by Microsoft Corporation may be used for internal review, analysis, or research only. Any editing, reproduction, publication, rebroadcast, public showing, internet, or public display is forbidden and may violate copyright law.
Can people hear me? Yeah, okay. Sorry, my voice hasn't gotten back yet, and hopefully be back by tomorrow or something. I wasn't going to say anything because of the voice, but I can't resist doing two things. One is I have to acknowledge the people who made this possible. First of all, of course, it's all of you. Thanks for accepting our invitation and coming and spending the 2 days. But of course, all the speakers, the session organizers, the people who did the research showcase demos, pretty much everyone else, and the three execs, Jeanette, Peter, you'll see, and Harry, who's usually hiding somewhere in the back there. And really, the amount of time and effort that these three put into making this event a success was incredible. That's, I don't know, if I add up the per minute cost of all that, it'll be a very expensive event, I have a feeling. But then I can't forget, most importantly, the wonderful, wonderful Ed who really came to us at the right time. I also want to thank all the organizers. A lot of people were involved. The entire outreach team really worked together on this. It was, really great to see us come together. I feel pretty proud being a part of that team. But there are 5 people I want to call out specifically, and maybe they can either stand up or come here. Judith Bishop and Catherine McKinley, the co-chairs who put together the program. Judith. And I know Catherine, she maybe is not here at the Catherine, come to the front. Let the light shine on you. So, if you found anything wrong with the program, it's definitely one of those two. Everything that was right is me. Thank you both. Sarah Smith and Mariah Christensen, who did a lot of the work in the background. You have 2 faces, names and faces that you probably don't know or seen, but without whom you wouldn't be here enjoying what you're enjoying. Thanks, Sarah and Mariah. But last but not least, the amazing Harold, who went through all the changes, the overall organizer. Give them a big hand. Thanks, all of you. You did such a good job. You have to keep on doing it for the rest of your life. Thank you very much. Okay. Now it's my pleasure to introduce Peter. That's the other reason I'm here. Even though my voice is down, I wouldn't miss a chance to introduce Peter. Peter, as you know, is the head of the New Experiences Technology group of TNR, Technology Research. But more importantly, most of you know him as a long-standing academic, a researcher, a person who founded a technology office in DARPA, and most of you know him. But many of you know, perhaps only some of you know, he's a charismatic speaker, very charming person. Now, there are a couple of things with Peter you should be wary of. He is such an avid sportsman and gamer. There's nothing that you can beat him on, including gambling. So I wouldn't bet against him on anything. If he tells you something, just believe it. And the other thing is that I quote him, it was said very recently, I early adopt. So having someone who's in a senior level manager who adopts technology 10 times faster than you do, that's a little bit of trouble. But with that in mind, let me invite Peter to share his views.
Wow, so it's really, I think that's the most unique introduction I've ever had, and certainly the sultriest. So thank you very much. I would also like to take this opportunity to thank and congratulate Anandan, who is really leading the whole team to put this together. So Anandan, very good. So it's been just an incredible experience, and I just want to start by thanking all of you for being here. I know it's an imposition, and it's hard, and it takes time and effort from all of your busy schedules to come and spend time with us. I hope it has been a good use of your time, and I hope you've enjoyed it as much as I have. We definitely don't take it for granted, and I am personally also thankful that so many of you are sticking out all the way to the end. I don't know how many keynotes from former CMU people you need to listen to. But I'm glad you're all sticking around for at least one more. So thank you. I'm very honored. As I was sort of experiencing the events of the last couple of days, it's just so inspiring. I know it sounds trite to say it, but I really mean it. The Jeanette's opening keynote yesterday, that amazing panel that Eric Horvitz had organized with just amazing sweep of discussion about the future of artificial intelligence. I just was really taken aback by really going all the way and thinking in terms of kind of large-scale evolutionary terms in learning. Just amazing. And then going throughout the day in really tackling head-on some hard issues about our community and the problems we have with diversity in our community, and just looking at the stark numbers, even more starkly than before. I was just impressed with our willingness and ability to kind of go after those things. And then today, just looking at all the demos, I felt very proud to have a chance to be a part of an organization that has a chance to show off a little bit and engage with so many of you. Most of that work was, of course, in collaboration with so many of you. And then I was just in the AR, VR, Holocene session, standing room only, and just you just get the sense that maybe there's the possibility that something big is about to change in how we interact with and immerse ourselves with the virtual and with computing. Just really incredible. And as I reflect on all of that, and over the last year or so, interacting with so many of you in hallway conversations, or as you visited us, or I've visited your labs and universities, or at conferences and workshops, or various government committee meetings and so on. As I just reflect on that, I'm just left really almost awestruck at what a vibrant community we're all a part of. And it's something that is, I think, just so precious for us. Together, as a community, we just are advancing human knowledge and doing it in ways that actually add meaning and help people's lives. And together, we're engaged in research that, on the one hand, has tremendous practical and even commercial value. Just the overheated venture capital market, again, here, not only here, but in China, other parts of the world, in Europe. And at the same time, that research is sometimes just achingly beautiful. And just in itself, just in that beauty, seems to just add meaning to our lives and to the meaning of our society and what we're all about as a species. It's just an amazing thing. And then together as a community, there's just, out in hallways, one thing I noticed yesterday is, wow, there's a lot of laughing going on. We have a heck of a lot of fun. And it's just an amazing thing. And so it's just so precious. And I am left thinking that we are really in a golden era right now. Now, as I was working on the tire tracks, one thing that leaps out at you is you look back at all the amazing stuff that happened in the 1960s, the emergence of VLSI design, birth of microprocessors, all of the early work on compilers and programming languages, and so many other things, the birth of the ARPANET. And you look at that and think, wow, what a golden era for computing research. But when you look at it now, at least for me, I'm just thinking we are in a new golden era now. And it's just really an amazing thing. I couldn't be happier and couldn't feel luckier that all of us together, that we are a part of this kind of community. And so time will tell if that's really the case. But I think undoubtedly we should all feel very good about what we're doing. And just revel in the time that we have. And just go for the gusto. I think Harry Shum, in his fireside chat with Ed Lazowski yesterday, was just trying to say that. Now is the time to really go for it. And so, that's I think the first thing I wanted to say. Now, of course, what I want to actually talk about today isn't just to congratulate ourselves and pat ourselves on the back, although I think that's a good thing generally to do. I instead wanted to address a topic which is sort of alluded to by the title of this talk. And this has to do with the possibility that there's some fundamental changes to our field, to our research, and maybe even fundamental changes going on in our society that have to do with the very nature of research and how our society, by which I mean our government, the public, and universities and all of our other great institutions in our society, how they view and tolerate the expense of what we do as researchers. And I took the title here as a ripoff of an op-ed that appeared in the Washington Post a couple of months ago by the MIT president, which was entitled "A Better Way to Deliver Innovation," which I thought was a remarkably bold title. It's always just, you're setting yourself up for failure if you're going to declare that you have a better way to deliver innovation. It's such an important topic, but such a hard one. But the op-ed, I felt, really struck me in a certain way, because in essence, it was also giving us, or putting into words, the sense that I'm guessing all of us feel, that there may be, as he put it, some profound shifts in how our society, our country, and really I think this is global, develops, adopts, and capitalizes on innovation. And this op-ed goes on to say that as you look at the different mechanisms that we have for doing this, for capitalizing and developing and adopting innovation, that there are shortcomings. We don't quite see the answers. If we look at our venture capital system, Raphael Reif writes, venture capital is simply not structured, at least the current system of venture capital, to support complex, slower-growing concepts that could end up being hugely significant. And then he goes on to say it might be unrealistic to expect big corporations, I of course read that as Microsoft, to patiently invest in technologies designed to impatiently disrupt them. Man, that just hit me right between the eyes. Because we have a lot of investments in Microsoft research that, if I'm really honest with myself, are designed explicitly to try to disrupt Microsoft, as well as the other players. But this is what we try to do, and there's real questions being asked about this. And of course, this also extends to the government. And Reif opines that our government cannot effectively supply the large-scale long-term funding needed for new companies and products. All of this, of course, pertains to innovation, but it really speaks to our community of researchers. Because hidden behind all of these words is the implicit assumption that the innovation starts with research. And that puts pressure on us as a research community. And so Eric Lander, a month before that, gave this amazing lecture at the Library of Congress. And I have to thank Ed Lazowska for pointing this to me. And in this lecture, he writes, it's very much worth reading, there are bills in Congress to ensure the accountability of taxpayer dollars invested in science. How could you possibly complain about that? What can possibly be wrong with wanting to have a clear case for how investments in basic research pay off? And of course, he states a fundamental truth, a truth that I think all of us in this room, all of us together as a part of the research community know is true, but it's so hard to explain. The answer is absolutely everything is wrong with that. That if you try to plan things out too much, you miss the serendipitous, extraordinary returns. But we feel this pressure because the world has come to believe, our world has come to believe, out of our unreasonable past successes, that the future of innovation, that our hopes for innovation all start with us, start with research. And as a result, when Reif is talking about how to get innovation faster, more reliably. He's actually talking about how do we get our research work to matter more in innovation. And that's where the pressure comes. And ground zero for this, I think, is the tech industry, our information technology world. Of course, everything else matters too, but nowhere today is it mattering more than information technology. And every company in our tech industry is feeling this. And so I do want to talk specifically about the reaction to this within Microsoft and Microsoft Research. But let me just zoom out a little bit. I was starting at the national level. Let me just zoom in, not quite to Microsoft Research, and zoom in just to the tech industry. And as I look around at the, let me just use the term innovation departments at all of our competitor companies, they're all feeling pressure. So wonderful people. I'm sure many of you have friends at Amazon's Lab 126. They're doing some fantastic work. But it is really hard as they try to go fast to do successful innovation. And as I read what's going on there, and of course we hear it not only in the tech blogs, but we hear it from people that we hire, because there's just a lot of people flowing back and forth between MSR and Amazon and Google and Facebook and so on. And so we just hear a lot of things. But as I read some of these quotes, wow, you know, it really resonates. I hear that you've probably heard it from MSR people. You've probably heard it from Google people over the last year. Or the struggles to really deliver, actually somehow ship something innovative out of advanced R&D activities in places like Google X. And as those things, those struggles kind of mount up, you hear more negativity, and this creates reactions. CEOs notice these things. And then you have companies like Facebook starting to set up and experiment with open research labs, and Facebook's AI Research Lab being a very prime example. You know, people were impressed last year with Mark Zuckerberg going to China and speaking Mandarin. What was actually much more impressive was Mark Zuckerberg going to NIPS and speaking the language of AI researchers. I mean, that was an incredible thing that he did. And so that investment there, and of course we see this even going overseas to China with Baidu's lab. One way I've talked about this to our people in Microsoft Research is that 5 years ago, all of your research colleagues were at universities. Today, it is just as likely for your research colleagues to be at Google, or at Facebook, or at Amazon, or at eBay, you name it. And the reason this is happening is that smart CEOs in our industry are desperate for that next big thing. And just like the MIT president seems to believe, they believe that next big thing is going to come from people like us. And so, can we do it? I think it's a big question. And of course, we have a smart CEO too, a new one. And he believes the same way. And he's really driven some pretty amazing and deep changes. Now, this is a picture that holds a lot of meaning for us in Microsoft Research right now. Because this is a photograph taken at Satya Nadella's first public outing in the Silicon Valley after he became the CEO. And this was at the Recode conference, and he had the prime first slot at Recode. And so when he was invited to do, to do this, he sent out an email to a bunch of people. I was very privileged to be on that email, telling everyone that he wanted to bring one tech demo with him to Recode. And so asking for ideas. So you can imagine all the pointy elbows in the company coming out. And just to be frank about it, at least in my limited experience at Microsoft Research, MSR would not normally engage in that conversation. We would just observe and be ready to help out once decisions were made. And so lots of different ideas were offered up, and Satya listened, and then after a little while, after a lot of emails, Satya basically said, I don't get it. I don't get all of these ideas. I want something that allows us to be ahead, to lead and be great. He used those phrases, that phrase. And he said, I would think Skype has that reach. He wanted something that really had real market power. And then we should focus on this for both speech recognition and translation and pour all of our MSR and product R&D into it. And so you can see there, even in his very first public Silicon Valley outing, he was looking first to MSR to be able to say something and bring something to the world that had the kind of imprint and aura of innovation. And let's face it, speech recognition, machine translation, speech synthesis, these are all of the things that only we do right now. It's something that is just cutting-edge research, contemporary research. Again, looking at our community together for answers. And so you could imagine after that decision was made, and there were lots of hard questions asked, and Satya stood his ground. He said, no, this is what we're going to do. We were suddenly under the gun as a research lab. It was a mad scramble. You see here Gurdeep Singh Paul. That's Walt Mossberg in who is the other person without hair. But Gurdeep Singh Paul is the corporate vice president who owns the Skype business, giving the demo. The demo is working really great. So that's a big sense of relief. And then Satya, on stage, as soon as the demo completes, publicly pronounces, oh, and by the end of the calendar year, we will deliver the public beta. Which would have been nice if he had discussed that with us first. But I tell that story because you can see there's some deviousness and really hard-nosed management by Satya, and he is totally aided and abetted by Harry Shum in all of this, to push and push and push to see the maximum that can be extracted out of research here. And so the way I think about it, and again the way I talk about it, is that we suddenly have been thrust into the middle of the innovation strategy for Microsoft, and we've been given a mandate to do more. And I mean mandate by the dictionary definition, meaning we have been given the permission to do much more in this company, but also the expectation to do more. And it is pretty darn exciting. I'll say more about that as we go on. Now, I do want to say a little bit about Skype Translator, and I'll say something about the technology and the research in it. But the other element of our new CEO is he has defined a very aspirational, the way I use the word corny, mission statement, which is to empower every person and organization on the planet, very romantic turn of phrase there, to achieve more. And as I've come to understand the thinking, Skype Translator was also just that kind of empowerment idea. Is there an idea about how to make money or generate revenues out of the Skype Translator? No. In fact, at the time that this decision was made, Skype had two missions. One is to lower operating costs and increase revenues, and two, to increase the reliability of the Skype service. And now along comes Microsoft Research with the backing of the CEO, with a technology that costs 3 times more to deliver per call, and that is a research rickety prototype. And so it is just the statement that this mission to empower people really means something. That is really the focus. And so to give you an idea of that, I think some of you have probably experienced Skype Translator, and we've been just so pleased to see how people embrace the technology, and people are getting real work done in ways that they couldn't do before. Granddaughters are talking to grandmothers in a different country for the first time. It's just really wonderful. But on this empowerment issue, I'd like to show you just a short 2-minute video of this surprising kinds of applications that come out of a technology like this. So if you could roll the video, please, that would be great.
When I was 13 years old, I lost my hearing when I got the mumps. As you can imagine, this makes it difficult to communicate with people. When I met my future wife, she was able to communicate with me only by spelling out letters on my hand. A month later, we met again, and I found out that she had taught herself the alphabet. This was a successful strategy because we've been married now for 19 years.
Last fall, Ted had come to my office to tell me about an idea that he had for adapting Skype Translator to a scenario that would actually be useful to him. Ted, being deaf, can't make calls over Skype, but with Skype Translator, because it produces transcripts, he could actually read the response back from someone. So we sat down and talked about it for a little bit, and there were some pieces missing in Skype Translator, so we needed to actually do something to make it more appropriate for that scenario.
Is requesting an automatically translated call.
I usually need to have an ASL interpreter for my meetings at work. It means that meetings have to be planned in advance, and sometimes this isn't always possible. It doesn't replace an ASL interpreter, but it gives me a lot of other options when one can't be reached at the last minute.
Although these features were really impactful for Ted in his work life, what really hit me was the realization that there was a big impact on his personal life.
I realized that using Skype Translator, I could call my wife directly for the first time. There are relay services that you can use, but they are inconvenient and require time to initiate the call. With Skype Translator, I just read the transcript and I understand what she has said. It's really cool that 24 years after she learned sign language to enter my world, I can take a more full step into hers.
So I was sitting back thinking about this and looking at it and realizing the impact that this could have for me, for people here at Microsoft, and for our customers, for people with deafness, with hard of hearing all over the world. Technology has that power. It can empower people to do things and make things easier. It's available now. Download it, give it a try, and help us to make this a better and better product.
I just really love that. And I love all of these research stories where the outcomes of research, the intended outcomes, maybe they happen or not, but the unintended impacts end up being the surprising, serendipitous outcomes end up being the really cool ones. And I really felt proud of this one. I'll say a little bit more about Skype Translator a little bit later. So, getting back to the beginning, there's just this incredible hunger for innovation, just incredible thirst to more reliably come up with the next big drivers of value, the next big drivers of impact on people's lives, the next big drivers of expanding people's imaginations of what's possible in this world. And just all of that wrapped up in innovation. And that pressure, I believe, comes squarely down on researchers and on the research community. And so all of the turbulence and the questions that we hear and that we feel right now, the sense that maybe society is becoming less tolerant of the expense of research, all of those things, they're all coming from this place. At the same time, it is also something that is exhilarating for us, because it is us as a research community that are being put front and center in changing the world. At least in my limited career as a researcher, I don't think I've been in a situation where I feel like our community is being asked to do so much and being expected to do so much. And so I use this crazy story, and I'm going to tell it here, and don't laugh at me too much, but it goes back to when I think I was 6 or 7 years old. And I grew up in a small town in Upper Michigan. And my parents, we went on some summer vacation, and I went to my first theme park, and I saw a roller coaster for the first time. And oh God, I wanted to ride that thing. I knew I had to ride it, but my head didn't make it up to the red line, so I wasn't allowed. So a year or two pass, we go on another family vacation, and I see a roller coaster again, and this time I'm tall enough. All right, so I get to ride the thing, I get strapped into that roller coaster car, and then as I'm going up that first hill, I realize, oh God, this is a big mistake. Okay. You've got to get me off of this thing. And then, of course, by the time I finish that first ride, it's just the best thing in the world. I need to ride it again. That's a story I tell to people, to our researchers, to our engineers, to our partners in other parts of the company, to reporters, to everyone. And the reason I tell it is I think that that is, roughly speaking, the situation that us, as a research community, that we are in today. If I reflect on this, I think that we have always believed in ourselves as researchers. We've always believed in the power of research. We've always believed we could do more for our company or for our university or for our community or for the world if only we were given the mandate to do more. And now that we have been given that mandate, it's kind of scary. There are uncomfortable questions. Maybe we get a little nauseous. Hopefully no one falls out. Okay? But things happen, and that is the situation that we're the dog that for years was trying to catch the bumpers on the passing cars, and now we finally caught one. And now what? And at least I can speak, I think, pretty much for Microsoft Research, and I can see Jeanette shaking her head. That is definitely the situation in Microsoft Research today, but I suspect that this is a much broader thing. So what can we do about that? What should we be doing about that? And it has been a real thought process and a turbulent one. It's been a roller coaster ride. But one of the things that has always been the case for Microsoft Research is that Microsoft Research has done a lot of experimentation. We've always sort of tinkered with models. And the reason we've been able to do that is we've been blessed with resources. We have about 1,250 people worldwide. We have a lot of funding and resources. We can try a lot of different things. We can try different approaches, different philosophies to management. We can try different ways to organize ourselves. And traditionally, MSR has done a lot of that. Some of you have probably heard of experiments like the Impossible Things Initiative. That was something that Rick Resch has started, or the Extreme Computing Group, or many, many others that didn't actually even have names, things that we just tried. And so we are embarking actually on a much more significant kind of experiment now in the creation of an organization in Microsoft Research that we've been calling Microsoft Research Next. And Next is sort of a double entendre, but the actual acronym is New Experiences and Technologies. And so I've been spending the last 9 months exclusively focused on building and trying to figure out what MSR Next should be. And so I'd like to just say a little bit about it. I don't want to get into organizational detail. It's kind of boring, but try to give some overall management philosophy around what this is. I call this a projects organization, and that's actually an allusion to the DARPA notion of project. And by project, it means several things. One is that we try to organize people in MSR Next into subgroups that are all aligned or going towards some clear goal. And I'll give you some examples of these things. But if you think of the Skype Translator team, that Skype Translator team has the goal to eliminate the language barrier for all internet-connected people in the world. So that's a goal, and it's something that actually, to some extent or another, can be easily assessed. And so that implies that the structure of MSR Next is highly interdisciplinary. Because to do something like the Skype Translator, you need distributed systems researchers, because you're trying to deliver a very complicated and expensive service to 350 million active users. You need speech recognition, you need machine translation, you need HCI. Many different kinds of people have to form that group. And that's a little bit of a deviation from the way MSR has been organized in the past, where we have really gone for serious intellectual depth and organized ourselves into groups around the grand disciplines of computer science and related fields, like machine learning, like computer vision, like cryptography, and so on. Second, and this is sort of an allusion to the Heilmeyer Catechism, if you know about that, is we talk about exit strategies. So pick some time in the future, 1 year from now, 5 years from now, 15 years from now. But imagine that future point and some change in the world that you want to affect, hopefully for the better. And now what is some credible plan for getting there from here? And of course, it's research, so we know that everything changes day to day. You get smarter and the plans change every day, but we try to have always in our project teams a thought of what we want the world to be like at what time, and some notion of how we think we can get there, even if that has to be revised on a near daily basis. And so we talk about this in terms of exit strategies because that also means that we think about how we will actually get things out into the real world or out into whatever community of interest we want to have an impact on. We've tried to change how we control resources and funding in MSR Next to allow a lot of buffer so that we can have an agile response. So if there's a new idea that comes up and we want to just invest quickly, we can do that. There was just a recent incredible idea for a DNA storage device that came out of some collaborations between the University of Washington and Microsoft Research. And so what we want to be able to do when we see exciting things like that is if we can really understand and push on the accessible goals and the clear exit strategies, that we can very quickly, like within a few days, provide the resources and the people to really get started. This really comes from Harry Shum and from Satya Nadella, but we've tried to instill an end-to-end mandate to give our project teams the right to take things all the way to the end. And in some of the MSR Next projects that involve actual setting up businesses, to actually act like startups and find ways to actually deliver all the way to paying customers if necessary. Now, most of our research projects aren't like that, but all of them actually have now the ability to own things and deliver them all the way to the end. And then finally, a big thing has to do with culture. You know, there's a phrase that we've been using that we want to celebrate innovation and reward great execution on our research work, but we want to worship impact. And that is just sort of a credo to try to instill this idea that what we're trying to do is actually bring what we can do out into the world. And so this is not that far off from what MSR has always been. MSR has always done things like this in the past, but we are now just trying to be a little bit more focused, at least for my part of MSR, be a little bit more focused and organized and intentional about it. Now, I wanted to tell you a little bit about just to give you several examples, to give you an idea of the kinds of things that have started. It's only been 9 months, so it's still early, but I think I can give a few examples to give you an idea. And as I do this, one thing I want to say is that the way we got started with MSR Next is basically Jeanette, Harry, and I kind of sat down and we sort of tried to find people who might be genetically predisposed to this next model, and move them under me, people who might have less comfort, although people always evolve, would not have to be a part of MSR Next. And then, of course, we've been hiring a lot. And that hiring has been quite a lot of work. I think we've hired well over 100 new people since last winter. And so it's a work in progress. And so I think the point of this image is to say that there's a little bit of a sense of changing the engines on the airplane while it's still in flight. And so as I describe things, some things are more aspirational than real, but I'll try to be as grounded as possible. And the examples I'm choosing are also examples of projects that had their origins outside of MSR. And the reason to do that is just to try to emphasize the things that maybe can be pushed and brought in from other parts of the company into the MSR model. Okay, so I talked a little bit about the Skype translator. And of course, there was this sort of surprising push from the very top. And we've been really, it's just been a huge amount of work, but wow, really just so much fun. The challenges have been just incredible. I mean, just the scaling challenges alone have been really tremendous. And we've just barely scratched the surface. We've been very cautious. We had a very cautious preview program that was very limited. And the only client application that has this functionality is the modern or Metro app for Windows, which has a very small user base right now. And so we've been very cautious about the scaling, but that will be changing over the next few weeks and months. But we are now on the road to just developing and releasing more and more languages and studying very carefully for some of our preview partners what people do. One of the interesting things about Skype Translator in our experience is we've been learning a lot about what I call intimate conversation. And what do I mean by that? Well, all of our speech and machine translation models, for the most part, were trained on transcripts of lectures and of speeches, trained on on business transactions, like you trying to talk to a hotel clerk who speaks a different language, you talking to a waiter or waitress, you talking to a taxi driver. So I call those all either formal conversations or conversations, business conversations between strangers. But when people are using Skype, they aren't strangers. It's that granddaughter talking to a grandmother. It's two coworkers who work for the same company and they're trying to get work done. There's a different vocabulary and a different kind of sense. There's an amazing amount of singing to each other that goes on in Skype. People tell jokes to each other all the time. People laugh. All sorts of things happen. So our models, just like Google's, just nail the talk to the hotel clerk scenario just great. So that's all fine. But hell, now that we've worked in Skype Translator, that seems damn boring. There is something much more human and much more intimate about the kinds of things that we're learning. And as a result, the models that we're having to ship are, for the most part, all coming out brand new. And we are learning so much about this kind of familiar, intimate conversation. And what is so exciting to me, besides the fact that we've had to do some groundbreaking work in disfluency removal and segmentation and so many other kinds of things that are actually controversial. If I'm trying to talk to someone in China and maybe I'm trying to become friends, the joke I have is if I'm trying to get a date in Shanghai, and I have a few ums and ahs, is it right? Is meaning lost if those ums and ahs are removed, as they are right now with our latest technology? These are very interesting questions. And as we get to the bottom of these things, what opens up for us and what is so exciting is that we get new business opportunities. Because if you look at a big part of our business, which is the enterprise business, and our support for things like meetings, this is a typical meeting. In fact, I hope Lily Cheng isn't too embarrassed. This is a photograph of a group research meeting in Lily Cheng's team. Look at that meeting. Look at that scene. Can't you hear in your heads what's going on there? That is not, like one stranger talking to a hotel clerk who's another stranger. There's a different kind of thing. So to be able to process the speech in these kinds of settings, I believe our experience with Skype Translator is giving us some insights. We're learning something about human discourse. And it's just incredibly exciting. And so I just see whole new vistas in fundamental research opening up before us. That Skype Translator is in the category of projects that I call strategic collaborations with product engineering. So we are joined at the hip with the Skype engineering team, and our success is Skype's success. We're just all in with them. The work that we do with HoloLens is very similar. The work we do with Bing, with Office, and so on is very similar. In one way, when we do that kind of work, we're being very respectful of the mindset and the thought process in the product engineering groups. But it's important for research also to have a part that either openly or not openly disrespects the thinking in the product engineering groups, that actively tries to kind of not just take for granted what goes on there. And so we have another part of our portfolio that really tries to be disruptive, that really tries to work on high ambition goals that, if met, if successful, would completely upend everything. And so we have quite a few projects in this bin. We haven't been very public or open with any of the projects to this point, although we, as you watch us over the next few months, you'll see more and more come to light. But one that we have talked about publicly is our quantum effort. And the quantum effort is, again, something that has a very clear end goal. I think you heard about some of it if you attended the quantum session yesterday. We have a program written by Krista Savori and her team for computing the energy minimum for ferredoxin. And we want to execute that program. Because executing that program, we believe, would lead to fertilizers and other nitrogen fixation technologies that would have a significant commercial value as well as the potential to eliminate world hunger. So now, what do we need to do to execute that program? That's our goal. And the only way we know of is with a quantum machine. And we've gone far enough to understand that a quantum machine would be able to execute that program. And so now we're on this path. And we've been doing some work that I think is incredibly exciting. It's a long path, but it is planned out. And we have dates in mind. Those dates seem to change all the time. But, you know, because our confidence in what we're doing and how good we're feeling about things changes all the time. It is research, after all, but we're thinking about those things. But the cool thing about this, and this is something we all know, another fundamental truth about research, is that when you go for these high ambition things, and if you're very focused, you know for sure that there will be lots of interesting, useful spin-offs along the way. And so this top middle image is this beautiful image, which I think is going to be so important. That is an interface between indium arsenide and aluminum. And you can see it's atomically perfect. And so we have managed to find engineering processes for doing that. Now, why is that important? Well, indium arsenide is a standard semiconductor. Aluminum, at low enough temperatures, is a superconductor. And when you have this atomically perfect interface, and you go to low temperatures, the Cooper pairs that define the superconducting characteristics of the aluminum start to inhabit that semiconductor. And when that happens, you suddenly have superconducting properties in a semiconductor. And now all sorts of things, microwave detectors and various sorts of devices that we know how to fabricate today in a semiconductor substrate, you just start dreaming about all sorts of things. And so these sorts of possibilities of spin-offs, the things that we learn by trying to engineer things at extremely low temperatures, just have far-reaching consequences, even if we never make it to executing Krista's ferredoxin program, Krista and Dave Weckers. Harry and Jeanette mentioned Catapult. So in this team, their goal, the way I look at their goal, is that from now until 2025, they have to keep our cloud on the trajectory of Moore's law. And so that's pretty hard. Now, the thing about this is, as you think about doing this, you have to think about a series of architectural and technology changes. And in the short term, the technological approach that has been taken is to look at reconfigurable computing fabrics in our data centers. And so working in great partnership with Derek Chu and his team in Bing, we ran a large pilot of about 1,600 servers on the Bing ranking load. That was very, very successful, gave us a lot of confidence. We are now on the path, actually, to carrying the full Bing ranking load in a few months in FPGA boards. And that then has created the possibilities that we can go actually whole hog, potentially at some point, to our entire cloud. And already the cloud business, Azure, has been publicly demonstrating the possibilities of encryption at line speeds for free in our cloud using this kind of technology. What's really exciting, though, to us is not anything that I just said. All of that was just a way of incubating the technology to persuade our company to pour in the hundreds of millions of dollars required to do that kind of deployment. But when we look at this, what we dream about is looking at the global network that was built for our data centers and overlaying on that global network a whole new kind of gigantic distributed computer based entirely on reconfigurable logic. And now what do you think we might be able to do with that? And all sorts of great dreams happen there. And so this is a third category of projects that we've been trying to fund that I refer to as incubations. There are research ideas and we've managed to prototype them, we've managed to test them, but now they're ready to kind of go much bigger and at that scale maybe give us new research possibilities. And as you look at those things, there's so many other things that all have that kind of flavor. They have some clear goal, and some time frame that gives us an idea of what kind of change we want to make in the world, a plan for getting there, a credible plan for getting the things out in the world, and then giving us some freedom to play around those things by putting enough resources around. And so this is an experiment. Will it work out? I'm not sure. But we're pretty darn excited so far, even in this early going. So I do want to take some questions, but before I do that, let me just close with a final thought. We are just incredibly excited. And just the kind of impetus and the mandate from Harry Shum and from Satya Nadella, just being a part of Microsoft Research and the great collaborations, interactions with not only the labs and Jeanette's whole organization, but XD Huang's Intelligence Services Group and Yuting Kuo's group have just all been fantastic. But I don't want to lie either. This has been an incredibly turbulent year. It really has been a roller coaster ride. And as I think about all of the things that we've gone through this past year, I reflect on it, and I just am incredibly proud now to be a part of a company that is willing to take the kinds of risks that it's taking right now. A company that really seems to get it and believe in what research can possibly do if only given that mandate. So this roller coaster metaphor, is it a metaphor or allegory? Allegory is actually very real, I think, for all of us. And as we think about how this future will play out for us, I'm hoping that as a research community, we can actually prove that all of the assumptions that people seem to have, that innovation is driven by research, people don't oftentimes say it, but it's actually implicit in what everyone is saying. It's implicit in the kinds of doubts and in the questions that people are asking about the cost of research. It's implicit when people are asking about the ROI and wanting to understand it. We now are in the position with this mandate to prove that that is all true and correct. And so I don't see any way, as Harry put it yesterday, that we can do it without all of us working together. I'm pretty excited, pretty confident, and really looking forward to seeing how this plays out. So thank you very much for listening. I wanted to leave a little bit of time, so I think we have 5 or 10 minutes for questions. So I'm happy to take any questions if there are any. Yes.
I mean, you talked a lot about, when you quoted people in the beginning who were really talking more about academics, about the worries about funding for academics, and then you spent the rest of your time talking about industrial research. How do you see the academic role?
Yeah, so the question was, I started early on with the quotes that were really looking at academic research, and then moved to industrial research. And now, can I bring it back to academic research? You know, I think that the fundamental questions that are being asked in academia and in industry for industrial research and academic research are, in my view now, and I think I have some perspective because I've been in both places. I think they're fundamentally the same. I think the urgency in computing research in industry is extremely high right now. Because right now, the tech industry writ large doesn't know what the next big driver of commercial value will be. You know, if the Apple Watch takes off and if suddenly every person in the first world starts spending $600 for a wearable computer, we'll all be happy for a few more years. But barring that, it's not clear what the next big drivers are going to be. So there's a desperation and urgency. And so that's why you see our CEO and the other CEOs really starting to look with some desperation at their industrial research or innovation departments for answers. But if you take that urgency away, I don't see any difference. It feels the same to me. When I was at DARPA, I visited about 30 universities and labs during my time at DARPA, 31, I think. And you know, you could just feel all of the great stuff going on, but also the kind of worries and anxieties people had about funding. And those worries were deeper than where is the next grant going to come from. The worries were kind of, there's an undercurrent of just concern about, wow, is society going to continue to understand basic research and its value and to tolerate the expense of it? So the urgency might be a little bit different, but I think we're all in this together. And so when I look, maybe I'm putting too much on MSR, but I do view us as important in our community because we are in some ways at the vanguard of that pressure right now. Because not only are we a part of this open research community, but we are just happen to be in a company in a very turbulent industry in a very turbulent time. I'm probably, so by the way, you know, I'm probably being overly dramatic about things, so you can take what I do and tone it down by a few notches, but I think I'm saying something relatively true. Yes?
Question for you, or possibly for any of the other executives who are there. You talked a lot in sort of generalities about how we should manage research and innovation and whatnot. What does MSR not have? What are you planning on doing going forward? Where are you planning on growing? And are there limits to what you think MSR can accomplish?
Oh, yeah. So there certainly are limits. Let's see. So there are, I guess, two senses of the question. One is kind of research directions, so what does our portfolio balance look like in terms of technical or research directions? Another way to look at it is what sorts of modalities or management philosophies might we try to adopt? And so there are interesting answers to both questions. You know, when we look at areas where Jeanette and Harry and I kind of think about, wow, are we missing the boat on some things? Topics that come up often are things like, Jeanette brings up neuroscience a lot. As we've gotten to see the importance of tangible devices and so on, there are more and more questions about materials, various aspects of materials and material science. Yesterday, robotics came up, particularly the kind of physical actuation and mechatronics there. There's very interesting questions about this whole cyber-physical systems or IoT space. So there are many, many directions, and we fret about these things all the time. In terms of other innovation strategies, we're trying to be as creative and open-minded about things as possible. One thing that happens at most of your universities that's hard for us, but we're looking at ways to do it, is most professors, if they have great ideas, or graduate students, they can go take a leave of absence for a year or two, spin off and try something, and with the comfort that they can come back. And so that is something that is much, much more difficult at Microsoft Research. And so we're thinking about things like that because it's important not only to maximize the potential for impact of the research that we do, but also to sort of inject that kind of entrepreneurial thinking in the culture of MSR. And so there are different thoughts like that. And so as we're sort of just having our hallway discussions, having our formal meetings, reviews, and so on, right now we've just ended one fiscal year and starting a new one. And it's a kind of a prime time that we think about these things. So ultimately, as big as we are, we do have limits. And so we're always feeling like we're hitting those limits. And so we have to make choices. And so we do what every department head, what every professor with a research group, what every dean has to do, which is to try to make those choices. So unless there are any other questions. So let me then close. I will be out. I think all of us will be out in the little reception afterwards. Thank you so much again for coming. We really, really are grateful for all of your time and attention. And I hope you enjoyed it. So, thanks.
Each year, Microsoft Research hosts hundreds of influential speakers from around the world, including leading scientists, renowned experts in technology, book authors, and leading academics, and makes videos of these lectures freely available.